All right. Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me in the hearing room is Laurie Davidson, and via Zoom is Robert Belenke. The assessor today is Nathan Kupfer, and the recording secretary is Stephen Lunn. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board. The matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 1 through 8 on our docket today. Mr. Lunn, can you please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony?
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Nathan Kupfer.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, please state your full name.
Rocky Neufeld.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Mercury, please state your full name.
James Mercury.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right. The first property on today's agenda is 321 McDermott Avenue.
Mr. Chairperson, I'm just wondering, Mr. Mercury's only here for one property, which is 850 Pembina. I don't know if it's possible to have that first and then he can go away.
That is, I was anticipating that, but I wasn't anticipating for Pembina Highway, but okay, that's fine. All right, we'll do 850 Pembina. Let me just pull up the files then. Okay, Mr. Kupfer on 850 Pembina.
Still getting my files pulled up here on the switch up. Okay, so this is file number 22-2396, roll number 1209-780-4370, street address 850 Pembina Highway. This is a commercial office building, or rather, it's a collection of commercial office buildings. There's 3 buildings on site, I believe, here. Constructed between 1977 and 2008. We have a total leasable area on file, which I believe is the same as the applicant's at 48,971. And we have a model-driven assessment here of 11,328,000, which which is split between two different classifications, as you can see, Class 60 and Class 40S school tax exempt. We're recommending that that assessment be maintained today. I've included photos of the property, as you can see on page 2 of my brief. It's a good overhead view. We have no recent sale, or sorry, we do have a recent sale, but it's too recent, 2022. So it got pulled from our brief. These are OFS properties. They're located just outside the downtown. So I've included our general OFS comparables table here. It's a rather large table. It includes quite a few OFS properties from around the city, including some that are fairly close to the property and within this area, including some that are actually on Pembina, including the subject property itself. If I pull this up here. So 3 buildings here, one is labeled as 850, one is labeled as 870, and one is labeled as 890. So you'll actually find these on my comparables list. Comparable 77, I believe here, is labeled 870 Pembina Highway Unit 200. They have a lease in place at $17 a foot and so forth. But the collection here is showing a weighted average of $16 a foot, which I believe is fairly representative of how we're modeling this property. Getting onto page 7 and 8 of my brief, you can see the 2 income streams. The first stream is for the Class 60 assessment. The second income stream is for the Class 40 assessment. So 15,090 square feet of space. That's only one of the tenants, I believe here we're saying is Class 60, and the remainder is Class 40S. Haven't touched any of these. This is all model driven again. Per our OFS parameters, you're looking at 6% vacancy, 3% expenses, an $8 shortfall. And in this case, we're modeling a 6.7% capitalization rate for both streams. So there's no change there. It's just in how the value is being allocated from what I can see. Page 9 of the brief shows the summary, the combination of those 2 income streams, and the total valuation of $11,328,000. Page 10 and 11 of my brief is our capitalization rate table and Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 13, 14, 15, and 16, I've included the income statements. And then on to page 17 with the commercial rent roll here. So like I said, there's 3 buildings on site. The first commercial rent roll, this is my page 16, is showing 2 tenants in the building. So Cimaril Inc., 4,511 square feet, is renting for a net $15 a foot. And then B&L Homes for Children, I believe this is the tenant here that is not being qualified for the Class 40S, as it's the 15,090 square feet. So that matches up with what we have in our model. They're also paying $15 a foot, according to the rent roll. Going on to page 17, you can see the Association of Professional Engineers in 14,370 square feet, indicating a net lease of $17 a foot. And then finally, page 18 of my brief shows the College of Registered Nurses, I believe this is, in unit building 890. Again, they're taking up the entire building, 15,000 square feet, from what I can see, at a net rate of $17.92. They have submitted their COVID questionnaire, mainly saying that the impact is not yet known at this time and no abatements have been provided. So given the rents that are in place, I have to say that our model is doing a fairly accurate job of representing those rents from what I can see. I haven't been presented yet with any information that would have me adjust that or adjust the classification in any way. So at this time, I'm going to recommend that our assessment be maintained, and I'm open to questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, questions, Mr. Neufeld?
Yes. Pages 7 to 9. So that these were all prepared by the model?
That's correct.
Okay. And in your rent tables that were provided, I'm looking specifically at 2 of them, number 16 and number 22. Under what authority were you allowed to use those rents?
As in, they would have submitted their income and expense mailer to us, and that would give us the authority to use the rents, I would imagine.
I'm sorry, could you wouldn't mind have a copy of that income and expense mailer that states what the rents are being collected for?
No, I've clearly not included the income and expense mailer for every single one of these in my brief.
Okay, does not the income and expense mailer say that these are being collected solely for the preparation of the roll?
I haven't reviewed these income and expense mailers.
Okay, well, if we're gonna stall here and you don't want to admit to it, I'll refer you to one of your briefs where you're asking for the penalty, and that is file 3035.
Why are you referring to a separate brief right now? We're dealing with 850 Pembina, to my knowledge.
It's my turn to ask questions, not yours. Now, under that, there's a copy of the mailer, and it says, this is the letter that's sent out, and I'm going to read it. The City of Winnipeg Assessment and Taxation Department is collecting information for the purpose of preparing the next general assessment in accordance with Section 9 of the Municipal Assessment Act. In order to make property assessments reflective of market value, it is necessary for us to obtain accurate operating income and expense information. We are currently collecting the information regarding operating statements ending in 2020. Now, were these leases are both dated June and July of 2020. Were they in the income and expense mailer then for the 2021 request for information?
I haven't reviewed these income and expense mailers, like I've stated.
Have any of these properties appeared before the Board of Revision under appeal?
I haven't represented them, I can't say.
When was your brief prepared?
Roughly 2 weeks before the hearing.
Are you familiar with the Municipal Assessment Act and the rules governing evidence?
Oh, what section are you referring to?
The rules of the Municipal Assessment Act. I believe it's section 13. It says that information shall be deemed to be then any information is private until the point it's entered into evidence. Are you aware of those rules?
Can you point me to a clause within the act, or would you like me to read the whole act right now?
Well, I can. Sorry, I just noticed this now, so I'm a little slow today. I will dig it up. Unless Mr. Mercury remembers the clause, we had this come up before. Okay. It's under the Municipal Board Assessment Appeal Rules, Municipal Board Act, and it's section confidentiality, section 15.1. All parties and their agents are deemed to undertake not to use the documents or information to which rules 13 or 14 apply for any purposes other than those of the appeal in which the material was obtained. Until it becomes an exhibit in the hearing of an appeal, the board must ensure that material filed with it under rules 13 or 14 remains confidential. So you're aware of those rules?
That's not what section 15.1 of the act states. I'm not sure what you're reading still.
I'm
15.1 is
reading-
errors do not affect validity.
No, I'm reading the rules of the Act, which is a different document, published in the Manitoba Gazette, July 25th, 2009, volume 138, number 30.
Then provide a copy of it if this is something you're planning on presenting. I don't know what you're talking about off the top of your head, and unless the chair people also and the panel members have a copy of this, I don't see what the relevance is going to be.
Well, you're not there to judge relevance. You're just there to answer questions.
Well, I
So,
can't really answer the question if you don't provide any evidence.
Well,
Mr. Neufeld.
I asked you if you were aware of it. That was the question. I'm not asking you to comment on the evidence. You said, can I read it to you, find it for you? And I did. Now, you understand how the rules in cross-examination.
No, you still haven't sourced the document or provided the document. So
Mr. Neufeld, Mr. Neufeld,
provided
if you're going to refer to a piece of legislation or a regulation, please provide it to the board.
Certainly. I'm sending it right now. It's marked as being received at your end.
Do you have it, Mr. Lund?
I've just received it now. I'm just distributing it. Hey, Mr. Kupfer, you should receive my email in a couple of seconds from my panel members by Zoom. It is in your SharePoint now, and it should be shared.
Put on the top and bottom.
It'll be the bottom.
Okay, called it municipal assessment act.
There, you have a copy of the municipal assessment act as well. And there's also one labeled the file number that's MMA.
Well, I'm not saying. I'm sure. Oh, there it is, rebuttal MMA.
Yeah.
Got it.
My panel members by Zoom confirm that they have the document titled 222396 rebuttal MMA.
Yes.
I do, I do see it, yes.
Mr. Assessor, did that email come through?
Yes, I've received it.
Perfect.
Okay, so proceed, Mr. Neufeld.
Yes, thank you. So the question was to refer the act, the rules, and under the Municipal Assessment Act, of course, the rules of the act apply to the to all assessment review. Where there's no specific act governing it, then it goes to this act, and if there's nothing governing that, they go to the Court of King's Bench rules. So there is a specific rule of evidence that is until something has been entered into evidence, it is private. Now, these two I referred to, one is being heard February 7th, the other is being heard February 3rd. They have not been entered into evidence because there's been no hearing opened. So my question to the assessor is, how can you submit evidence that was obtained under a different reason and deem that it's appropriate to use as evidence when, and as we all know, the informal rule the assessor used to govern themselves by was they would not present any information until a property was heard in a hearing. And that's what's at stake here. So this entire section of rents that's dated from 2020 at least should be stricken from the assessor's brief and should be purged from the public records.
Okay, Mr. Kupfer, what is your response to that?
To be honest, Mr. Chairman, I can't have much of a response. This really isn't a rebuttal brief, and it wasn't part of the evidence package, so I wasn't able to prepare for this. I don't really see it as appropriate to pull something out in the middle of a hearing and demand some sort of change based on this.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, we're often beset with these preliminary issues at these hearings, and this is one that until we got to ask the questions of where they got the information, we didn't know it was a preliminary matter.
No, Mr. Chairman, preliminary issues are labeled and made part of the evidence package 2 weeks beforehand. They're not submitted during the hearing after it's already started.
yes, Mr. Neufeld, I think it would be fair to presume that the city got their information from the mailers.
Well, I don't think so because there could have been contact, there could have been a supplemental, there could have been all
Right.
sorts of things. He answered the mailers. At that particular point in time, it became a problem.
I will allow this information into evidence and it will go to weight. We'll listen to your arguments when we weigh the evidence. So proceed.
Okay. All right. It is, in my view, an error in law, and I'm not a lawyer, but you can't allow evidence that's not permissible.
Well, I have made my ruling. So if you don't like it, you're free to challenge it as you see fit.
All right. I just want there's been a bit too much of this jumping the gun and presenting evidence where a property has not even been appealed. And I know for a fact that this rent roll was prepared sometime well before the assessments were even open. So my belief is that comps 1 to 33 are all been provided illegally.
We have heard your argument and the ruling has been made, so proceed with your questioning.
All right. Did you review the statements of the subject property?
What statements?
The ones you have in your evidence. Have you reviewed the statements that you have in your evidence?
The income statement and the commercial rent roll, is that what you're referring to?
That's correct.
Yes, I have.
And did you note that the actual performance is under what the model has generated?
Yes, I would note that.
And are you aware of any of the issues resulting from the expropriation of the site?
No.
To your knowledge, does the model have an ability to adjust for acknowledged losses in utility caused by the expropriation?
No.
Those are my questions, unless Mr. Mercury has any.
Just a couple of follow-up questions, just with respect to the classification breakdown. Am I correct that the tenants that you are, the square footages that you're using for the school tax exempt would apply to the nurses, the engineers, and to Cimaril? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and you've referenced BNL Homes as one of the tenants in the rent roll there?
Correct.
And you're aware that they actually vacated the property?
No, I'm not aware that they vacated the property.
Yes. And Cimarron, in fact, took over a portion of the space that they previously occupied.
Okay, that's good information for our records.
Okay. And that, I believe that was in 2021, early 2021. And they, just for clarification, and just trying to find your rent roll page here. Bear with
Starting on
me.
page 15, 16.
Yeah, thank you. So if you look at page 16, and you'll see B&L Homes, second column down, they were occupying 15,000 square feet, and they actually vacated the premises prior to that date. You weren't aware of that? Prior
No,
to June of 2021?
No, when somebody vacates, eventually the permit will come through, field assistant will follow up. It's just managed through our data system in that way. I can make a note in our system that they vacated, and we can do an inspection based on that, hopefully.
Right. I think it has been acknowledged by other representatives of the assessment department, so I think that the city is on top of it. It just appears you weren't aware of it.
Okay.
I hadn't realized in advance that the classification and liability was also appealed. So what we will do is we'll continue Mr. Kupfer's presentation on value through the questioning, and then we'll go to Mr. Neufeld for the classification and liability.
I just there, Mr. Chair, I don't believe that there is an issue. This matter has some history to it, and I think the assessor and the taxpayer are aligned in terms of the actual the tenants that are in fact subject to exemption. So I just wanted to clarify that point. I don't believe it's a matter of contention.
Oh, okay. So the class and liability as presented by the city are in fact not being challenged?
The proportionate amount would not be an issue. Of course, the value is an issue. So if the value changes, it's just a matter of changing the proportionate value for school exempt versus fully taxable.
Okay, but it's
Does that
still,
make sense?
yeah, it's still 15,090 square feet taxable, 660T and 33,881 40S. You're accepting those?
I'd have to defer to Mr. Neufeld on that. I believe that is correct, but we can advise if otherwise. So it's essentially the tenancies that are subject to the exemption are the engineers, the nurses, and Cimarron. And for a portion of time, B&L Homes has now vacated the property, so it's Cimarron that is subject to the exemption. And I think this is a matter of agreement with the city.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Okay,
okay. Yeah, just a follow-up. I know Mr. Neufeld asked you weren't aware that there was a earlier expropriation a number of years ago with respect to the property. So you're not aware of any impacts that the property owner is facing?
No, I'm not aware of any impacts regarding expropriation. Can't speak on that.
Okay, thank you. Those are our questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Lori, do you have any questions on?
I just had a question of clarification. You indicated that the variables were all model driven. Were the actual comparisons for rent that you used, were they selected by you, or were they also model driven?
This is a big OFS comparable sheet put together by our department.
Okay.
So not hand selected by me, not even specific for this hearing. I would submit this for any OFS property generally in the city.
Okay, thank you.
It does actually include the subject property in two different places though. So I think that's a really good supporting evidence.
So this is used for all of these class of offices?
Suburban offices, that's right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Belenky, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right, and I have no questions. So, Mr. Neufeld, you can proceed on quantum then.
You're on mute there, Rocky.
Sorry, subject property is three office buildings on one roll, a regular shaped parcel of land that it runs from sorry, I am a little bit under the weather, so if I'm a little bit slow today, it's just it runs from the rail lines northwards to down Pembina Highway, and the property access is on from Pembina Highway is based on an easement, and if you'll note the round table, which is in our, it used to be called a round table, now it's called Brazen Hall in the picture. That is where the access comes from Pembina Highway, and there's there's two access points, but that's the southbound lanes turn in at the Brazen Hall entranceway. The northbound ones have another access point. So there are easement agreements in place that when the properties was subdivided, that they shared the access from these. It's an irregular entranceway, and it's always been a bit of an issue in terms of usage, in that a low volume usage is indicated rather than anything high volume like retail, because of the access points. And it does impact the highest and best use, in that we have Pembina Highway, which is predominantly retail oriented and is not conducive to retail use. So it is been developed as an office use. It's not being able to hit your highest and best use, of course, is an impact on marketability of a property. What happened approximately, I think the date is in here somewhere. With rapid transit, the city decided to do a correction on the underpass of the railway on Pembina Highway, as well as some additional lanes on Pembina Highway. And so there was an expropriation served on the subject property to take some of its frontage away. The sketch of that taking is on our page 13, and it shows there's an aerial view with an overlay in red, and then below is the actual sketch. So they took a wider lane on the southern edge, and that narrowed a bit, and that went all the way up to the property line. This was to accommodate an extra lane on Pembina Highway. So now Pembina Highway has 5 lanes at this juncture, and 3 under the bridge. In doing so, there were a great number of impacts on the subject property, and one of the issues is that the expropriation focused on having on almost 0 lot line on the southernmost building, which I think is 890 Pembina Highway, and a picture of that is on our page 8. So I took these pictures during the process, and you can see that the steel supports for the roadway are approximately 3 feet from the side of the building. Now, the actual lot line is closer, because the city built on the lot line, and you can see the excavation is on the lot line. So it's a 0 lot line at the corner. And so this was exposed and then widened, and there was the shoring that was put in. And on 890, the other impacts were fairly widespread on page 10, the bottom of page 10. This is the fire lane on the west side of the property. It always has to remain clear. So the expropriation took some of the fire lane away and impacted the parking that was in front of 850 site, taking that away because there was no longer room to park up front. The other impacts had to do with the noise, the vibration, and we have actual building shifting that's occurred. So I was out there myself, and I took a very, very primitive view of this, but I had my level, and I just went from office to office and looked at the levels and the shifting and the cracking. So they have lost about 6 windows from cracking, the shifting. They've been replaced. And there's fissure cracks all through the building, specifically this southernmost building, which is the nurses inside the foyer area, which is an open 2-story foyer, which is had shifting. Most of this vibration and movement occurred during the construction phase. On page 11, the bottom picture, this is the roadway that was used for general hoarding and maneuvering on to get to the rapid transit space. So what they built is this roadway, and they put down crushed rock, and the heavy equipment moved through this area. This was the worst impact. So when it was all done, the city put up an ugly chain link fence and left it at that. So this expropriation is still open, and there's been no settlement yet. There have been numerous issues, which is why we're not quantifying them today, because that is referred to to another hearing. But as they impact our property, the parties, meaning the city and the ownership, the ownership is represented by myself and Mr. Mercury, have acknowledged a series of defects that one is noise, and the train track and the underpass have now heightened the noise. Parking, there have been a loss of 16 parking stalls. Landscaping, I know this is subjective, but they lost trees because the roadways went in. Future building expansion, there was a plan, and there was a concept plans to expand the southernmost building as market conditions demanded. That's has now gone away, no possibility. The numerous issues to do with the fence, and this, like I said, the city puts up a chain link fence on a property it expropriates, an ugly chain link fence. Now, if you look at the fences that are around rapid transit, they have the tubular aluminum fences, which although a little more basic in look, are at least more aesthetically pleasing. But we have an industrial fenced compound fence around the property. Site grading and general landscaping. There's a picture that I took where when the expropriation was going on, there was not only a permanent taking, there was a temporary taking, and the temporary taking was to allow construction equipment through the parking lot of the subject property. So at the bottom of page 9 is the eastern side of the buildings, and the pictures do not quite show this justice, but
Rocky, your pictures pages aren't numbered, so we're getting a bit.
Oh yeah, I know that. Sorry. Well, the bottom of page 9 is the detail is not really showing up in the picture, but what's happened is that the foundation has been impacted by the heavy equipment that has been placed on the site. And the bottom of page 10 shows one of those pieces of heavy equipment. I'm just looking to see if I had the other picture I took. The equipment that was placed on site, it was cranes with extendable arms for weight, and they extend their hydraulic arms and they put down their posts for supporting themselves, and they've impacted the pavement. The pavement was designed and built with, I think it's like 2 or 3 inch asphalt for carrying the weight of vehicles, not heavy trucks. So we think that the parking lot needs to be repaired at some point as well. That was my point. Lots of words, but bottom line is the pavement was wrecked. And during this process, economically, we saw an erosion of income, where prior to the expropriation, most all the rents were $15 to $16, and then as the process went on, the achieved rents dropped to the $12 and $13 range, and it's there has been some slight recovery at this point in time, but it's impacted the revenue as well as the risk level for the future. So when we looked at the valuation, we had the statements, and these are the same ones that the assessor had provided. On the page 3, which is the first page of the statement, marked page 1, it shows that the potential income as full is $801,000. The recovery income is, and these are potential incomes. These first 2 sections are all potentials because there's adjustments later. The recovery potential is $319,000. Now you'll note there that in the operating expenses recovery accrual, that there have been changes in that, and these are not vacancy driven. These are actual adjustments to the rents to deal with the changing property tax calculation, and this is. And I'm only telling this not just to explain why this journal entry exists, is that 5 years ago, we brought this into hearing, and an assessor made the statement that expropriation was a windfall and he wanted an increase in value. And for some strange reason, it was granted. Now it's under appeal, but it's out there. So these are those adjustments that relate to that statement that having an expropriation is a money earner. It's not. So that's why these are in place. You'll note that when you look at the actual taxes later on, that there is a balance there, but it does impact the face rates. So the potential income is approximately 1.12 million, which we're reflecting on as full on our page 1 as being the income, and then the expenses after that are listed as to what they are, and that would be the number on the page 3 on the operating expenses, and from that calculation we then get the net potential income. The building is essentially shifted from being a net one to being a semi-gross one, so the statements are quite difficult to reconfigure. Colliers manages this site, so we do have some good professional assistance. So we then deem that the net potential income is $743,000 as shown in there. As to vacancy, we looked at the Johnson report, which is the best documentation of vacancies that the city has, and I'm having it in front of me here. And what the Johnson report does is it has 20 pages that show every office in the city with their vacancy rates. So it's completely transparent. You can look through it by district and look at the vacancy rates. So the overall vacancy rate in the city of Winnipeg for office is 9.9%. The suburban rate is 7%. Now, what we do is we blend the two because of sample size concerns. For example, the total inventory for office is about 18 million square feet, where the suburban is only 5.4%, and in classed suburban, which this would be, is only 1 million square feet. So it's a low sample size. So in doing this, we're stabilizing the vacancy risk by a market amount at 8.45%. In terms of the non-recoverables, normally we were looking at a 5% amount, but because the statements have moved to be a semi-gross statement rather than a net building, that is not the proper way to read them. A lot of the, for example, the non-operating expenses listed here are 359,000. Now, of course, depreciation and mortgage interest are not to be included, but the rest of the expenses are about 27, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, about $75,000. Now, some of these were moved to normal expenses as a semi-gross building, and some of these remained as in the non-recoverable category. So you'll note that on the cash side, we had about approximately $72,000 in non-recoverables, and on our page one, some of these were put into a full expense category, some were listed as a non-recoverable. But in the long run, there's no double dipping. The numbers were just changed to reflect a very, very unusual situation. In terms of shortfall, this is understated. We know that the assessment department has a model, and we know that it puts out $8 a square foot for every office in the city, which is ridiculous. Shortfall is not a fixed item. Shortfall fluctuates with income, because as income rises, taxes rise, and taxes are the predominant part of a shortfall. The other expenses that apply to buildings are percentages, so they fluctuate as they should. Shortfall, being a fixed one, does not. Now, this, because a major part of the building is school exempt, the tax load is actually less than the $8. And if we're fully taxable, the shortfall would be closer to $10. But we have taken it as is, because that's what the statements reflect, a lower tax load due to the amount of school exempt. However, if it were exempt, it would be fully taxable. So I think that should be adjusted higher, but I'm not going to make a change, leaving us with an NOI of 626,000. As to cap rates, the Collier's cap rate study is the basis for our calculation, and that's listed on page 10. Under suburban office, our rates show between 6 and 6.75%. Those are for the best category of office building. And it should be noted that there is virtually no Class A in our city. So these are classed areas as per our definitions, A, B, and C buildings. The entire inventory in the city of Winnipeg is 1 million square feet. And these are the ones that we monitor. These are the ones that Colliers would be tracking in our cap rate study. On page, just want to see where it is. And this is way towards the end of the document. It's 53 out of 56, the third last page. This is I ran the investment sales of office buildings in the city of Winnipeg for the years preceding the effective date, and there were absolutely no investment sales in the A, B, and C category. There was one D, being 379 Broadway. The rest were just not investment sales. There were no sales. And our brokers know that there are no sales. Now, with a lack of sales, that does not give license to use old rates, because we have to determine the impact of COVID on the market, which was immense. And all of our market reports indicate a massive impact. But because we have the calculation, and ours is extrapolated and interpolated from data across the country, the limited sales that did occur, and the spread to mortgage lending rates. And then experts in our office looked this over and provided an opinion, what would a Class A, what would a Class B sell for? And the answer was between 6 and 6.75%. Then we look at our subject and look at the negatives. Remember that this 6 to 6.75 are the best properties, not every property. There's no one size fits all here. Everyone carries their own risk level. And then the adjustment, which we have on our second page. So first and foremost are the impact on the expropriation, which was kind of a subjective call, because we don't know the extent of the repair, nor do we know what the city is planning to correct on the building. Even if they pay for everything, we got short-term losses, which makes this a poorer investment. The Colliers cap rate is based on the purchaser situation, not the vendors, so it doesn't reflect the actual practice. That's an easy adjustment. Our cap rate's based on land title transfer fees and commissions being part of the capital cost. So that's an easy, it's a mathematical calculation, and it changes the cap rate upwards about 0.15%. The access is the first column was wiped out here. Location and access, the underpass and the easements, it's always been poor access. As I mentioned, it's undermined the ability to achieve a better highest and best use. The configuration with the multiple buildings means that we have excessive, we're dealing with 3 sets of problems, 3 sets of buildings. Probably be a better design to have one building, and this is a minor thing. The building abutting the traffic at 890, again, this is a difficult call. What do you do to a cap rate on it? It makes it very difficult to lease, and not everybody likes to see the cars whizzing by. I mean, there have been no shortage of complaints from this tenant on the noise that's changed since it's moved in, and it's something that in an office, those of you who have to work in an office, the problem and the noise is one of the largest complaints we get at Colliers in property management. There's somebody doing something else, they're making some noise, I can't work. It is an issue. The impact of the expropriation is in the building condition and quality, which is 4 out of 8. That's 2/3 of the way down, and those are the issues I described. There are numerous issues that need being addressed. So at the end of the day, we're thinking probably an 8% cap, which would account for a higher cap to deal with the risks that are being looked at in the future. So that comes to a value of $7,829,000. I think that's the extent of my narrative and presentation. Just looking through this, I think we've pretty much covered it all. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
Yes, please.
Sorry, just before we get to questions, just a couple of points to just finish off, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
Just because I have been very closely involved on the expropriation matter, the matters that Mr. Neufeld touched on certainly have been acknowledged by the city of Winnipeg. With respect to noise and vibrations, it's not just the road, the rail line in the back. I'm not sure if Mr. Neufeld touched on this, but when they did the work on the Jubilee underpass and the rapid transit line, or the active transportation, they actually had to relocate the rail line closer to the buildings So that's to the rear of the property, and so that has caused significant issues, particularly when we're dealing with an office setting. So it's not only the closer location of Pembina Highway to the buildings, and it's very close, but the rail line to the rear has caused issues, and that has been acknowledged by the city, as has the loss of parking, the loss of landscaping, and the fencing issues. So I just wanted to highlight those matters because they certainly do have an impact on the overall marketability of this property. So those are the additional comments I have. Thank you.
Okay. Now questions, Mr. Kupfer.
I was hoping to get clarification on the net rate that was used and the per annum that was generated of 743,922. How is that amount selected or calculated, Mr. Neufeld?
As I said from the statements, the income is full is on, let me just get to those pages. Income is full were the rent revenue and the recovery revenue. And then after that were the expenses. And so when we go down to the next, the column beginning with operating expense. So the operating expenses are all listed here, and they total let's see, the last page here. $310,000, and that's on the statement page mark, page 3. Then there were non-operating costs of $360,000 approximately. That some of these were put into the operating costs, and they were. I don't have the details in front of me, but certainly not depreciation, not mortgage, not the vacancy expense, but some of these other fees were put in there because at this point, the building was clearly not a net operating building. It was a gross building, and the proper methodology to deal with non-operating costs is to put them into a gross building. So that was an adjustment made and put back into it of these costs that ended up being on page 1. 374,000 from the 310, so 64,000 from that category was added into it, and then after that there was another 14,000 that were deemed to be true non-recoverables that were not generally going to be repeated, and that was the leasing commissions, so they were put as a line item on the non-recoverables. It's a different workup on a gross building than a net building.
I'm correct in stating that you haven't provided this workup to derive that value?
No, it's in there. Everything's in there. The numbers are all there.
But you haven't provided the calculation for deriving this 743,000, correct?
Well, you got a calculator. Take a look. They work out.
Okay. You left out the commercial rent roll, correct? On this property?
We did not include it, no.
Okay. Your office rent comparables, you list 850 Pembina, which is the subject, 3 times as the first 3 comparables, correct?
Sorry, let me just get to that section. Yes.
Okay, you're showing a rate of $17 for a unit of 4,511 square feet.
Yes.
Correct? Is that Cimarron Inc.?
No, that was, I think that preceded Cimarron. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, you're showing a rate of $12 for a 15,090 square foot space. That would be BNL Homes for Children, correct?
Let me just look into this. That was BNL, yes.
And on the commercial rent roll, which is provided in my brief, B&L Homes is listed as a $15 net rent, correct?
I have no comment on the accuracy of your brief. It's a rent roll which does not reflect net rent. It reflects gross rent.
Do you have a comment on the accuracy of the commercial rents submitted by your clients?
As I said earlier, we have a building that is not a net lease building because it's been moved into this category of being a gross, semi-gross building. And it's clear from the statement that whatever's reported on the rent rolls is not accurate for use to glibly take and say this is the rent, because that's not the case.
So this is a Colliers managed property, correct?
That's correct.
Does Colliers produce these commercial rent rolls for their clients? Is that how it works?
I believe they produce the statements in the rent rolls, yes.
So Colliers produced a rent roll that states B&L Homes for Children is renting for $15 a foot. And you have as your second comparable on your list, the same space renting is $12 a foot.
No,
correct?
that's a misrepresentation.
How is that a misrepresentation?
It's we did not produce a rent roll that's called it net. Now, if one were to look at the numbers provided and match them up and compare the rent rolls of all of these properties to each other, you'll know that there are differential recovery rates. And on that respect, the rent rolls were completely useless. You have to go right to the statement.
The rent rolls that are produced are completely useless. That's your statement?
That's correct.
Regarding the rents? Okay.
They're useless for our purposes. Anyone who's putting reliance on them would be doing so mistakenly. One should go to the statements.
You've included two vacancy reports, correct? And vacancy rates for Class C downtown offices is the first one that I'm looking at.
Let me just look at that. All right, I lost my page here. I accidentally closed it. Hang on 1 second here. No. No, we have an overall Winnipeg rate, all offices, 9.9%, and then all suburban, 7%. No classic.
No vacancy rates for Class C downtown offices was my question. That's your first vacancy report given.
It's not on our page 1. Where are you
No,
referring to?
no, you would be down past your municipal excerpts that you've included here to your vacancy rates for Class C downtown offices.
What page is that? Or roughly what page is that?
It's after your page 33, your analysis of 215 Gary Street, which I'm not sure what that's there for at all.
The yellow table?
No, the one before that. Vacancy rates for Class C downtown offices.
Oh yeah, no, that you know what? That's just an error. That was a document that was put into all of our reports when we were dealing with the office and suburban, not relying on this for this property.
And then the orange table on the following page is labeled June 2021, which would make it post-reference, correct?
Incorrect. You are mistaken. It is not.
What's the reference date for the 2023 assessment?
You are not correct.
What is the reference date for the 2023 assessment?
You are not correct. This information, and I have this report in front of me, was prepared from data from December 30th, 2020 and backwards. There is not a single transaction in here that comes before that date. It is published in June of 21. Now, on that logic, your report got to be tossed out for post-reference because you made it 2 weeks ago, you told us. But your data is 4 or 5 years old. So the same standard goes into effect with professionals. Not a single transaction is in here. Now, I could tell you that if you took a narrow-minded view of it, that the vacancy rates in 2020 were actually higher than we applied. That's on the next page of this document, page 51. So I totally reject this. This is if you don't know the document, don't try to take shots at it. That's just improper.
Again, what's the reference date, Mr. Neufeld?
April 1st, 2021.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Okay, Lori, do you have any questions?
I just have a simple question. Is your recommended or proposed or requested assessment of 7.829 million, is it distributed between institutional and office in the same ratio as the cities?
Yeah, I don't think we didn't give you a number or breakdown. I think the ratio would be the same as it's already been agreed to. And that would be so the breakdown is the 31.3% 60T and 68.7% 40S. So that number would then be or 60T 2,454,000. And for 40S, $5,375,000.
Okay, thank you. That was all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, and Lori asked the question I was going to ask on the breakdown. So I have no questions then. Thank you very much for your presentations on this one. Let's take a break till 10:20, and then we'll come back and do the next properties. All right, welcome back. We'll resume with 321 McDermott Avenue, and I will point out we have 2 hours left to do the next 7 properties, so please be precise and to the point. Thank you. So, Mr. Kupfer, you can proceed on 321 McDermott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is file number 22-2514, roll number 1309-619-8500. Street address is 321 McDermott Avenue. This is a commercial office building, 5 stories in height, originally constructed in 1912. We have leasable area on file of 30,628 square feet, and a 2023 assessment, which is model derived, of $1,910,000 that we'll be recommending today. Page 2 of my brief shows we have no sales or no recent sales, at least for the property. Page 4 of my brief, I've included an OFD rent comparable table. So unlike the OFSs, these are properties that are considered within the downtown. And then D would be the lowest class of building, as in it's an older building. We have 2 rents actually in place, and they're included on the rent comparables table here. That would be comparable number 8, 321 McDermott Avenue 301, 10,000 square feet at $16 a foot. And then comparable number 15, 321 McDermott Avenue, again at 10,000 square feet, this one at $16.72 a square foot. So those are the only 2 tenants that I'm aware of in the building. So currently the building is about 2/3 occupied. Both rents up at around $16 or a bit over per foot. Page 5 of my brief shows the modeled income workup. Like I stated, OFDs are generally our lowest class of office buildings, so they tend to get the lowest rents and the highest vacancies. This one, we're modeling a potential rent of $261,984 divided by that square footage of 30,627 is an average rate of about $8.55. So the building's actually renting for quite a bit more than what we have modeled here. We also have 5 parking stalls being added through the model again, as this is a downtown property. The parking gets added as an additional stream. In this case, it's only 5 stalls, and we have a modeled net rate of $51.75 being applied, and a 5% capitalization rate. Page 7 of my brief shows the income value summary, combining those two streams and producing the estimated market value of $1,910,000. Scrolling down, I've included all the income and expense information that was submitted, like always. The income statements and the commercial rent rolls. Draw your attention down to page 20 here, where it lists the 2 tenants. We have group strength benefits. I believe they're a group benefits provider. It looks like they were originally leasing 5,000 square feet and then took on an additional 5,000 square feet. That's how I would read that. Paying, like I said, $16 a foot. Again, the lease indicated to be commercial net. And then this is the Board of Governors. I believe this is Red River College. Again, 10,000 square feet, indicated to be at $16.72 net. The parking spaces are actually on a gross lease, or again, they're being indicated to be on gross. They're renting them for $1,800 a year. Equals $150 a month. You put roughly 50% expense ratio on that, you're looking at a net rate of about $75. So in my opinion, both the net rate per foot that we're using for the office space and the rate that we're using for the parking are actually below what's being charged, at least what's been reported to us. So in this case, I'm going to recommend that our 2023 assessment be maintained. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Neufeld?
Yes, just start off with the basics. Page 5 and 6, these 7, these were all done by the model, I take it?
Yes.
Now, you had described 2 rents that you spoke to and came back to as well. And let me just find the exact page that was on. Page 4, 2 in the building, being your number 8 and number 15. Now, you just repeat for me, you call those net rents?
That's right.
I mean, that's what you said. I want to be clear on this. That's what you said. They were net, right?
Yes, I said these are net rents. It's clearly indicated on the commercial rent roll that these are being reported as commercial net rents.
Okay. Now, did you review the statement on page 10?
Page 10 as in the income and expense mailer?
Your page 10.
Yes, I'm looking at the income and expense mailer.
How much is recovered in the building according to the mailer?
States $17,738.57 for general administrative recoveries, and $9,401.23 for utilities maintenance recoveries, $626.11 for property tax recoveries.
That 626 is a negative, correct?
Correct.
So approximately $27,000 in recoveries. It's about right.
That's what's indicated on this page, yes.
Now, in the next column, what are the total expenses? Line 217.
214,000. Can see if that's 579 or 519.92.
So essentially 27,000 is recovered, 214,000 is expensed. You're still insisting that these are net rents?
Yes, these are indicated to us to be net rents.
And where this indication, where does this come from?
Looks like on the commercial rent roll that actually likely would have been prepared and submitted by Colliers on behalf of the client, if I'm understanding this correctly, based on what you said on the previous property. Lease commercial net for both tenants.
Oh, sorry, you're saying Colliers prepared this?
But you said that Colliers prepares the commercial rent rolls for their clients.
I
during
said
the
that
last
for
property.
850 Pembina. Are you saying that now Colliers prepares this one as well?
I'm asking if they did.
You're not
because
asking,
this
you're
is
answering.
clearly what it shows.
Let's not get sidetracked here. Let's move on.
Okay, we're into some dangerous ground here. Now we've got this assumption of an untruth. I don't think I should stand for this.
Okay, well, both leases are indicated to be commercial net by whomever submitted this on behalf of the property owner or the property owner themselves. And I haven't seen any information whatsoever to discount that.
So for $217,000 in expenses, as indicated on the statement page, and that's on, they're saying 29,905 square feet. How much is that per square foot?
I haven't made that calculation. If you'd like, you can run it through your calculator.
Sure. So 214,519 divided by 29905 is $7.17. And is there any disagreement there?
Yeah, that's what those two numbers would equal.
Okay, $7.17. So now I believe you're referring to lines, pages 20. Is that correct? On those, one is the Board of Governors, 10,000 square feet.
Yes.
So on that page, $16.72 per square foot is the rent. That's you see that?
That's what's being indicated to us.
And the recovery is 84 cents per square foot.
I'm seeing 80 cents for management under that. I'm not sure which one you're looking at.
I'm
84 cents for the Board of Governors. Yes, that's correct.
84 cents is recovered. 717 is the cost. Now, you're sure that these are net rents?
As I've stated, the owner or the property owner or whomever submitted this is telling us that these are commercial net rents. You're here representing the property owner.
Can you
It would be great if you could provide clarification rather than questioning me on it. Like a lease
your
agreement or...
statement we're questioning on the determination of the net rent, and I just want to clarify the issues here. And I'm asking the questions. So the question, I'm just on point, 84 cents recovered, 7.17 is the cost to run the building. Now, what was the other space you mentioned? Is that on the other lease? Who was the tenant?
Group Strength Benefit is listed as the tenant.
Okay, so that's the one on page 20 as well. That's two areas of 5,000 square feet then, is that correct, on the top of page 20?
That's correct.
And the rent is listed at $16 a foot on the upper area. And what are the recoveries listed as? 37 cents on the first space and 80 cents and 2 cents. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And then the expansion, the original lease amount, 586, that's parking. You can note that, and they've circled it, parking. And so the recovery is 80 cents plus 29 cents, or $1.09 a square foot on a building that they said cost $7.17 a square foot to rent. Now, looking at both those numbers, are you still asserting that these were net rents?
I'm asserting that it's been indicated to us by the property owner in writing that both of these are commercial net rents, as is clearly shown for you.
Where does it say that they're net rents?
Commercial net, directly under lease, directly next to the lease ID on the same page that we're looking at. Commercial net, and then the parking is listed as commercial gross.
That's the extent of your investigation into this, that one line item?
Yeah, if the property owner is indicating to us that they're indicating that they're leasing on a net basis, I wouldn't call them up and request, a copy of their lease, for example. I don't know what else we would demand of them.
Now, there's throughout this page, there's page 18, for example, has a contact number, Kayla Flockton. Did you contact her to clarify any of these issues?
No.
Okay. Have you been in the building?
No.
Those are my questions. Thanks.
Okay, Robert, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Lori, any questions?
I have no questions either. Thank you.
Okay, you can proceed, Mr. Neufeld, on your presentation.
Yes, I think it's clear what the issue is here. That's a misinterpretation of rents. Building is a gross rent. This rent roll that the assessor is referring to is a form report, and it segregates the parking from the commercial applications. It's clear that these rents are gross, and just based on the statement, we've represented this property for about 15 years, and it's the first time I've heard anyone refer to these as net rents. This has been through municipal board. It's been through case management. There are no issues. This is the first time I hear this discussion that it might be a net rent. It's incorrect. The actual statement indicates that as supplied to the assessment department, and because I'm quoting them, I'll just read from the assessor's page 10. 313 in income, 1,000 in income, 214,000 in expenses, and this includes parking income, of course. And the parking, it's correct. There are only 5 on site. There are you can note that they have 2 separate roll numbers. That parking is listed in the site. Big vacancy problem, as can be expected. Our interpretation is not an interpretation. The income is 179,000 based on removing the parking income and what they're actually earning. And our vacancy rate at 16.83% is in this case, we are again trying to stabilize it. The actual vacancy, we worked it out about 26%. The statement was, I believe, 33%. Office overall in Winnipeg is 9.9. Miscellaneous office is 14.6. So we stabilized it at 16.83. Not much difference from what the assessor had at 15%. So we are relatively on the same page. And the costs on here have been calculated of a 5% non-recoverable shortfall, which is rather low because it's how do I say this? It's a cheap building. So earlier I made a statement about how the shortfall rate must follow the income as a fixed cost, and we know the income to be around $6 a foot overall, and the not so the shortfall should reflect that a lower amount than what the assessor has. They've got 8, we've got 380. So that's what it is. We've capped it at 10.5%, and our reasoning is listed on page 2. First of all, it's a heritage designation, and that is a major problem in terms of alternate use. The, the This entire block is owned by the same company as well as the block next door. It's Richelieu, which are the garment manufacturer. So this was their downtown work campus, and their need is different. They would have preferred to demolish. There's actually a historical building next door they want to demolish. Can't do it. Can't do what they want with the building. You're stuck. Their other building is stuck with windows built in 1912 that they can't replace, and it's going obsolete. This one's a little bit more modern, but the problem with the heritage is that whatever's there is fixed and you can't change it. Some of the protected issues are wood in stairwells. An interesting thing is that an ISO 9001 certified company will not rent a building that does not have fully fire retardant emergency exits. So of course they're not going to rent this building anyway, but that's just a point on when heritage protects a building for all the good it does for our self esteem, it impacts the earning ability of the building. It's a severe negative. And other than that, I mean, it's age-related deficiencies. It's built in 1912. It's low condition, high vacancy rates. It's not going to get better. That's why we put it at 10.5%. Sorry, one remark on the our calculation of vacancy rates, and so I get another kick at the cat. Johnson report, these all came from the Johnson report, 9.9% citywide, 14.6 for miscellaneous office. The newest entry in this Johnson report is dated December 24th, 2020. So to be clear, the 21 report was compiled in 20 and was assembled in 20. The data was from 20, then it was compiled, and then it was printed. And it's a one-man operation. I know Mr. Johnson, known him for 20 years. I've known his predecessor on this report, Mr. Croach, very familiar with this report. I don't care to hear those comments about it being post-reference, because that's just not appropriate. If you don't know the proper product, don't comment on it. So that aside, this is a gross building with poor income, and I think our evaluation is very, very reflective of the value. Thank you.
All right, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
Am I correct in stating you've included no income and expense information for the subject property? I don't see an income and expense. I don't see an income statement or a rent roll or anything in your brief.
We had in our possession the same one that you had submitted, and our preference is to let the assessor submit these, which we know you do. I don't care to release clients' information, and once it hits hearing, if you've submitted, it's not my problem with the violation of privacy. That's what we do.
This is the second property in a row now. You submitted 6 pages of municipal board information. It looks like pertaining to 2016 appeals of some OFB properties. Do you want to comment on why this is in your brief?
You don't have to look at it. I've not brought it up.
Okay. You state that this is a warehouse style property. Is Group Strength Benefits using this as a warehouse?
No, the definition on this is loft warehouse. That's the broad definition for the 100-year-old buildings in this area. They're all labeled loft warehouse because at one point in their life, that's what they were built for. Not purpose-built as office.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
Okay, Lori, any questions?
Yeah, just to clarify, so you're asking for $1.2 million assessment. That's just for the office. Then we add on the 62,000 in parking, like you're
No,
on that, or is that the total?
No, that's the total. The parking is included in the rent roll. So the private industry doesn't doesn't break that down like this. If you'll note that the rent roll that is in the assessor's brief, you can see that the parking is included for every tenant. And
Mhm.
some of it is like there's 5 stalls, right? But if you go and read the rent rolls, you'll note that there's a lot more parking being charged out. Like I don't like referring to, well, page 19 is looking at the stalls and counting them. I see
So
one.
sorry, the total assessment that you're asking for then is 1.2 million?
Yes, includes the 5 parking.
So is your parking, then you agree with the city at 62,000, so then the office would just be 1.2 less 62,000?
Yeah, that's if you wanted to put it
You're
that
breaking
way.
it down?
Yeah, this is their terminology, not the
Yeah, I'm
industry
just kind of
terminology.
making them
Yeah,
apples to
yeah.
apples here.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. That's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Okay, Robert, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
All right, and I have no questions, so thank you for that.
Brief summary.
Then go ahead. First of all, Mr. Cupfer, do you wish a summary?
No, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Rocky.
The statements provided by the owner indicate $125,000 in net operating income. And we've applied 119,000 after a few adjustments. You know, I don't have a problem with 125,000, except that I think our number is a bit more accurate in regard to all the offsite parking that's in the rents. We've mimicked exactly what they're earning, and the assessment department is mistakenly calling these net rents. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We will now move to 929 Corden. Okay, let me pull up the files. Okay, 929 Corden, you can begin, Mr. Cupfer.
It's file number 22-1949, roll number 1202-3043200. Street address is 929 Corridon Avenue. This is a one-story commercial office building located right on Corridon, just past Stafford Street. Originally built in 1954 with an effective age on file of 1967. Total leasable area 5,456 square feet. And a 2023 model-driven assessment of $1,158,000 that we'll be recommending today. We have no recent sales to go off of for this property, so we're on to page 4 now. I've included, again, the same OFS rent comparables table, no changes, no omissions. That's what we're looking at here. The property is partially owner-occupied and has 3 spaces, we'll call it. On page 7 now, the A1 high quality finish, that's the modeling code we were using here for the dental office. We have C2 standard finish as well. That one's being used by, I believe it's Frescolio. And then the C9, the basement space, we're showing is being tenanted by the owner themselves. So it's 2,728 square feet, I believe, per floor. That's 2,728 in the basement and 2,728 on the main floor, giving you that total leasable at 5,456. Everything here is model driven, like I've stated, 6% vacancy, 3% expenses, an $8 shortfall, and a capitalization rate of 6.35% is deriving that value of $1,158,000 using the income approach. I've included the income and expense mailer, again, and all the information that was submitted, listing the 3 tenants here. You can see the doctor listed as tenant number 1, Frescolio listed as tenant number 2, and then I think it's the Smith Agency, which is the one that's not an arm's length tenancy. It's partially, I believe, same owners. So That's the information that we have on this. Oh, and they also state some moderate COVID impacts. They provided, it looks like, some minor rent abatements to their two tenants, the Dental Corp and to Frescolio. So based on what I'm seeing, the rents that are in place are generally reflective of what's being charged and generally supported by our OFS comparables table, which includes, among others, properties on Corridon and somewhat in the area. So based on all that, I'm going to recommend that 2023 assessment be maintained at $1,158,000. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Newfeld?
Yes, now you stated this is model generated. Are the three premise IDs all classified as office?
The first tenant class is A1 high quality finish. The second is C2 standard finish. The third is C9 basement leasable.
Yes, but are they all office classes?
I just told you how they're being classified. The entire parcel is being classified as one as commercial office. They don't get individually classified.
Okay, so it's all office. Now, you mentioned there's a dentist in there. Do dentists normally get classed as office, or do you have a medical subcategory?
They can often be classified as OFM medical.
Okay, and the other tenant is purveyor of olive oils, which is retail, but you classified it as office, correct?
That's correct. The whole parcel is being classified as office.
And the basement is also office. Now, with your workup on it, you've only used an office standards for shortfall and vacancy loss, correct?
Correct.
And cap rate then would also be derived from an office classification?
Correct.
Why didn't you go with multiple revenue streams?
I didn't do anything here. This is model driven.
Okay. So whoever input this just put it all as office rather than is there a rule or a rule of thumb that you follow? Because every time I come here, you got breakdowns for office versus retail, and in this case, we don't.
No, I can't speak to any rule of thumb.
Okay. Now on page 11, they provided their statement, and they did have an allocation for the basement space in the income. Did you look at this statement?
Yes, I've looked at the statement.
Now, based on this, they're showing a net loss of $13,000. Did that not have give you some concern that your model might be incorrect?
No, because like I said, this is a partially owner-occupied space. So the income and expense information generally isn't going to be reliable or reflective of market.
Certainly, but did you look at the scale of what that could be, what that difference might be? I mean, we're talking a very large difference between a loss of $13,000 and a model indicated income of $83,000. So we're talking a lot of money here. But you're saying that you didn't look at this and try to reconcile anything?
No, again, it's owner occupied, so the rental income, again, should be higher if it were being rented out. And that would adjust the net operating income. I haven't done any further analysis on it.
Well, what's the size of the owner's basement rental unit?
It's indicated to be the entire area, I believe. If I can read this, it's 2778 or 2779 around there.
Okay, so based on 27, it was 2728.
It could be. Double check.
28.
Yeah, 2728.
They're providing an owner-occupied rent of $8.14 gross. Now, do you have any basement rents in your workup?
No, I don't.
You know the general notion on how basement rents are calculated in our market? Recoveries, issues, anything like that?
No.
So the model is saying that this basement rent should be $12.58 a square foot net, and they're saying $8 gross. So that's one discrepancy you're saying in the owner occupied space. Now, what about the other spaces?
What about the,
Did you look at what they're declaring for rent and try to compare?
no, I haven't.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thanks.
All right, questions, Robert?
No questions, thank you.
Lori?
This is just a theoretical quick question. If you had that on the different streams, like instead of all office, recognizing the, you know, the medical and the retail, would the numbers, would they be a lot different, do you think?
In theory, if this is being modeled accurately and correctly, then splitting the three streams would equal the exact same value as the combination stream that we've generated here. I can't really speak much further on that. You're correct that if things were broken down, they would have different individual variables between retail, medical, office that can be slightly different.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I have no questions, so Mr. Newfield, you can begin.
Thank you. So the method that this is leased is that's income and expenses are reported is the owner's methodology. It doesn't fit how the assessment department works, but I think it's a point of order here. Smith Agency owns this property and have been doing business in Winnipeg for 110 years. This is what they do for statements for 110 years. I think they've earned the right to have some bit more respect on their statements than has been given them. When we look at the statement on, it's my page 3, and I forget what the assessor's page is, they have given you rents which are approximately $24 gross for the upper area, $8 gross for the basement area. And the expenses are approximately in this case $98,000, which is approximately $18 per square foot expenses. Now there is one expense in there, insurance deductible. That's another factor, so that shouldn't be taken into account. But as I was saying earlier, the 24 gross, 18 costs, it's actually a bit less than that. We worked it out to $11 is the net rent on the upper level, and we're using 5 on the basement. And 5 on the basement is an issue where basement rents, most buildings, and we manage over 100. When we have a basement rent, we call it all contribution to overhead. There's usually no recoveries in the basement rents because it's extra space. And by most standards of BOMA and brokers and appraisers, there's a reluctance to use basement space as a leasable space, but it is appropriate to call it additional income. Now on page sorry, I'm just looking, I had basement rents, that's on our page 5. So we have a series of basement rents, and you can see they range from $1 to $5. The most recent one is 2025 Cordon, which is a modern shopping mall. The dance studio in the basement is getting $5 a foot on a net basis. Plus 1512 Region, that's a bedding retailer, $4.25 on a net basis. Those two spaces are actually code compliant basement leases. Now, some of the other ones in here are a bit older and for special uses, but this is a very fair rule of thumb. And the issue on the basement space is it's occupied by the owner who manage properties. They're old time, and you know they've got 100 buildings. They didn't go take their best building and put their office in it, because their thinking is that's where I make my money. We're going to put our offices in our worst space because I don't want to displace income. And this is the worst space. Now, just to underscore that, the $25,000 that shows up on the income side was related to a basement flooding problem, which is shown on page 6 and 7. The pipes broke. The sanitary sewer pipes broke. The entire basement was in need of some very extensive cleaning. The pictures fail to capture the absolute disgusting grossness of the sanitary sewer breakdown. But it is the worst space in the building. Now they just there was no expense added to this because it wasn't insurance coverage. They had to pay the deductible. They wrote it off, and we looked at the statements. We didn't include the 25,000, and the income didn't change. The renovation was fairly extensive, and our page 9 is after the flood waters had been receded and the beginning of the repair work. The property has been, like I said, in use for its entire life. This is not premium Corridon retail. This is 60-year-old Corridon, and Smith owns 30% of the buildings on Corridon Avenue between Stafford and Pembina. Not 30%, probably about 15%. But they are the dominant player on Corridon, and it's not fancy boutique space. It's old buildings like this. So the income, taking out the 25,000 is dollars of a one-time expense, is actually about $12,000, and that's a fair representation. We're using $43,000 by stabilizing the upper levels and putting in a higher rent for the basement than they're actually getting. So we have looked after any concern about the owner's space. They're actually what they're paying is not even cost recovery, so we've called it $5 net. And the vacancies established the same way, and non-recoverables in this case, they're huge. So normally with the net buildings I mentioned earlier, we don't include them, but in this case, we made modifications and altered the gross to net rather than completely following the statement. So the non-recoverables were included. NOI of then is 33,000, and the cap is reflective of a lot of issues, and not some of them are, of course, the parking issue. There really is no parking on the site. There's a few stalls at the back, and for the building, if this were subject to bylaw, and of course it is subject to bylaw, Corridon, they seem to turn a blind eye to it, but your normal allocation for space would be 1463 divided by 250. So you got 6 cars for retail and 5 cars for office. So you would need 11, 12 spaces, and by code, by bylaw, and there's about 5 stalls there. So that's below. And what I'm saying with that is you won't get an alternate use in there, a new alternate use that's going to give you phenomenal rents, because you don't have the parking either. And the building size is small. The basement office is undesirable. It was built in 1954. The quality and condition, just judging by its defenselessness against the sanitary sewer break, gives you some real concerns about condition. I think 8% is really being very overly overly high, sorry, overly high valued. It's not going to generate anything like that. And so that's our number, 415,000. My presentation.
Okay, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
I'm wondering why the income and expense mailer was included for this one after you stated during the last presentation that you don't generally seek to include these.
Well, I wouldn't read an awful lot into that. We don't really have, we make decisions as we go along. In this case, this particular client is comfortable with his mailers being published. Sometimes they're sensitive, sometimes they're not. We work for them.
Am I correct in stating you have no office rent comparables on Corden or Stafford or really anywhere in this area?
Well, we're relying predominantly on what it's generating as far as comparable rents. There are some on Sherbrooke we've supplied and some on Pembina we've supplied. Generally, Corden seems to be a fair amount more of owner-occupied spaces, and there are some rents on Corden. We don't really get into those ones because it's a market that's more defined by a non large commercial operation like our own. It's not something we do a lot of on Corden.
So you're relying on the income that's in place for this partially owner-occupied building, not
No.
the comparable rental markets.
No, it's getting $8 gross. We put $5 net. As I mentioned, the operating costs were I've already forgotten the number here. 98 minus 25, so 73,000 divided by 5,400. Op costs are about $1,350. So essentially that's giving them a gross rent that we've applied at $1,850 a foot.
This appears to be a book rent that's been in place since the 1990s. Is that the $8 basement rent that you're referring to for the Smith Agency?
Book rent, it's an internal allocation. It's fair. It's undesirable space. They've got 4 basements on Corridon. They're not getting any income for most of them. It's accessory space to the space above. The buildings they own tend to be built with basements, and they don't generate income on a basement.
I have no more questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Robert?
No questions, thank you.
Questions, Lori?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, I have no questions either. All right, so let us move onwards and upwards to 6 Donald. All right. Open the files. Now there is a non-co-op requested on this one. So Mr. Kupfer on the non-co-op.
Starting at my page 11 here.
First of all, can you read in the file number and roll number?
Yes, sir. That's file number 22-3035. Roll number 1203-1860100, and the street address is 6 Donald Street. So we're requesting non-co-op for this, as the income and expense mailer was not filled out or returned. I've included a copy of the letter. I've included a copy of the mailer. And we have a signed Canada Post delivery receipt on page 19 by the owner of the building. And that ownership is confirmed on page 21 of the brief, as that was the same individual who filled out the sales questionnaire that we mailed to the new owners after this property sold in 2018. So based on all of that, we are requesting that the burden of proof be shifted and the non-cooperation be applied in this instance.
Okay, questions, Mr. Neufeld?
Sorry, just 1 second here. No questions.
Okay, questions, Lori?
Just a really quick one. I think you said it and I missed it. I see the letter that was sent. Did you have something you said was signed that they received it?
Yes, page 19.
Okay, sorry, I'm close, but not on that page. Okay, thank you.
Okay, questions, Robert?
No questions.
All right, Mr. Neufeld on the non-co-op.
I reviewed this with the ownership and I'm just relaying his comments. He really doesn't recall receiving it. I'm not saying that he did or he didn't. He just doesn't remember. His bookkeeper passed away in I believe it was May of 2021, and it hadn't been replaced. They were shut down for COVID, so I believe that was his answer as to why, if they were received, why they weren't given any attention, because of the death of the worker and the closure of the business.
All right.
And I haven't supplied that information, obituaries or anything, just out of respect.
All right, I guess the panel will recess to consider the non-co-op. All right. Thank you very much. The panel has considered the non-co-op and we're going to grant it. I think the Likerson decisions are very clear in that as soon as the city has demonstrated that the request was sent and received, then the panel has no discretion but to grant the non-co-op. So, Mr. Neufeld, that means you can proceed on the value.
We'd like to confirm it then.
Okay. I can see why. All right. Actually, to be quite frank, this is why I thought you had Mr. Mercury in attending this morning. This property.
No. I mean, it's an unusual circumstance, and
okay. Well, we'll just then get Mr. Cupfor to read in his valuation.
So once again, this is file number 22-3035. Street address is 6 Donald Street. It's a commercial office building with 13,930 square feet of leasable area and a modeled assessment for 2023 of $2,895,000 that we're recommending be maintained today. Thank you.
All right. Robert, any questions of, I guess, either party?
No questions, thank you.
Lori, any questions?
No, thank you.
All right. So then we will move next door then to 8 Donald. Again, let me pull up the file. All right, Mr. Cupfor on 8 Donald.
This is file number 22 1862, roll number 1203-1851-000. Street address is number 8 Donald Street. This is a commercial office building. As you can see, it's an old house conversion. Originally built in 1891 with an effective age on file of 1932. Leasable area is 3,532 square feet. I believe that's spread out over 3 floors. And we have a 2023 model driven assessment of 551,000 that will be made recommending today. We have no sales for this property to make it easy for us, unfortunately, and not many converted house comparables. So I've just included our standard OFS rent comparable table here. You can see on page 7, we're modeling the space with an average rent here, 43,227 over the 35-32, be about $12.24. Again, I haven't changed anything here. This is all being applied by the model, the 6% vacancy, 3% expenses, $8 shortfall. And in this case, the capitalization rate of 6.85% is deriving that value. This property is fully owner occupied, so we have no other rents or site-specific lease information to go off of. I believe it's a tourism company called Around the World in 80 Days. I'm showing on the mailer, and they describe significant impacts on their COVID questionnaire at the bottom. Which you can imagine as a tourism agency, I would expect that they would have had a significant impact. So that's fair enough. That's all the information I have about this property. So at this time, I'm going to recommend that assessment be maintained. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Newfield?
Yes, the rents that you've provided, running, I believe, from page 4 to 6, how many of them are multiple levels?
I don't have that information.
Of the ones that, do you know any that are multi-level? Like, for example, number 27 across the street, 5 Donald. That's multi-level, right?
I would suggest so, given that it's unit 400. It generally means it's not on the main floor.
Does it have an elevator?
Number 5 Donald or the subject?
I'm talking about 5 Donald. Does it have an elevator?
I don't know if that comparable has an elevator.
I'll put to you it does. Does the subject have an elevator?
I would suggest that it likely does not.
And how about, I'm just picking ones that I'm quite familiar with here. Number 49. This is I believe a 4-story building. Does that have an elevator?
I don't know.
It does. Well, so my question relates to when your model puts together these rents for multiple levels, do you take into account that it lacks an elevator or barrier-free access?
I don't believe an elevator would be accounted for in that modeling.
The property is listed as being built in 1891. How did it become effective year 1932?
That was a change made by another member of the department. Generally speaking, the effective year gets built based on permit information that gets sent in.
Specifically, what was that?
I don't have that specifically.
Now, whether it's 1891 or 1932, you would agree that's rather old, isn't it?
Yes.
Any of your buildings built between 1891 and 1932 in your comps?
I don't have the ages of the buildings, my OFSs.
Well, then how can you use them as comps? You don't know if they have elevators, you don't know their ages, and why are you presenting them then?
I'm presenting them as the best available comps. As I said, we don't have a comparable list for house conversions. There aren't very many of them. And then the ones that they don't generally lease at a net arm's length lease. They're more often than not owner occupied.
Well, no, I mean, my question's a little more basic. It's the meaning of the word. How could they be comps when you don't know what's in them?
I said they're the best available comps.
Now, a building built either 1891 or 1931, a 6.85% cap, wouldn't a building like this be close to the end of its useful life, and you would expect to see a much higher cap rate?
Nope, I feel like the 6.85% is reasonable.
Based on, and what is your experience on cap rates?
What is my experience on cap rates? I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, you said you think it's reasonable, so
Yeah.
you're making an opinion. So tell me where your the basis of your opinion, the strength and length of your personal professional experience on this matter.
I would just say, I guess my experience is working for the city in this department for the last 6 years.
So you're supporting the model, is what you're saying.
I'm recommending that the model value be maintained, like I said.
And you did indicate that you haven't been in this building, I believe, in an earlier question. That's correct.
That's correct.
Do you know how the square footage was changed from a gross area listed as 5372 to a rentable of 3532?
No, I don't.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
All right, Lori, questions?
I did have a question on the cap rate. It's 6.85%, and I was just looking at the property prior that we looked at, number 6 Donald. It was 6.7, and it's a 1975 effective year, and this is the 1932. And then earlier on Corridon 929, it was 6.35, and that was 1967. So it looks like the age isn't one of the key drivers in the cap. So what would be the key driver to a 6.85% cap for this property?
Well, that's a really good question. I believe that the age is a driver. The big difference between this property and the others that we've discussed is it's being modeled as OFR instead of OFS. So I would posit that our model is seeing a lower risk level in these OFR properties relative to the OFS, and that's why it's selecting that lower cap rate as 6.85%, despite the advanced age of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Robert, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, I've heard this building in past cycles, I think at least twice. If I recall, the uppermost story is used as accommodations. Is that correct?
I can't say exactly how it's used, only that the owners are indicating that it is fully owner occupied and they're using all of the space.
All right, I'll ask that one of Mr. Neufeld when the time comes. So you can proceed with your presentation, Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you. Yeah, the building, original building is 1891. Now there was a modification done, and it was a covered walkway around the outside that was added at some point. I don't know when. And there was an additional floor added to the rear at some point. And so the city has made this change to 1931. 1932, I should say. I don't think that that's quite reasonable. The heart and soul of the building remains the same. The additions like this don't increase or improve the remaining economic life, because if the core of the building is 132 years old, then that's what we have to look at. If that fails, the small additions mean absolutely nothing. Having said that, all I'm suggesting is we focus on 1891, not 1932. That's a change that's so subjective in nature and part of a mass appraisal system that it doesn't meet reality. The measurements, incidentally, were done by myself, and we had an assessor on site, and we remeasured the building. That's how it changed from the 5300 whatever to 3532. They had several areas in there that in their plans that no longer existed. So on page 1, we have it listed by floor area. None of the upper level is accessible by barrier free. So the second level is used for support. So they have their staff kitchen there and private areas. The first floor is the customer areas where they with several desks to meet the agents. And the upper level is, yes, it is correct. It was there was a last time I was in there, there was a bed and personal effects. I asked at the time, what's the predominant use? And they said, well, we don't really like live here. It's sort of like, you know, an occasional use. And so we ended up just classifying this because it's so small and insignificant that a residential class would really mean nothing. We just classified this as accessory storage space, again, because it's on the third level. And to get up the stairs, we are dealing with 1891 stairs as well. And now there's a few pictures of it further on, and they're of, I'll just try to, again, I apologize for the paging. So page 5 is the first level, and the open area that they've done with the original posts in the way. The second page is the second level, so the print room and one private office. The bottom page is a first floor space. The back of the next page, which is sorry, not paged, is page 7, is the top picture shows the addition I was speaking of, and you see the sort of you have a peaked roof, and then on top of it you have a part that comes out with an eave over top of it, and that was added, and as well as the stairwell, the corner stairwell where the white doors at the bottom, that was added to it. And then there's a second floor walkway you can see in the background with railings on it, that was added. And those are the additions. The middle picture is the third floor, and you can see why I wasn't really in excitement to classify it as residential, because there are some commercial uses there. There's some boxes of records. The bottom picture again is the third floor with the pitched roof. And I took great care not to take pictures of people's personal effects, but they are in the other room. But we're not asking for a class change on it. It's just this is like a space that's an attic storage almost, you call it. You can see that it's not used in an everyday basis. As to the rents, 12, 8, and 5 is what we were looking at, and the rents that we were looking at on our page 3 were difficult to find rents. There's a number of older buildings on Bannatyne and Arthur. They range from $5.50 to $8. That showed some indication. There's 470 River, which is just down the street. It was another site we found that was at $12.50 for main floor space, and that was some guidance for the first floor. And some of these other ones, again in St. Boniface, gave us some guidance. But the ones I mentioned are the ones we predominantly looked at for rents, and they're showing the range that we ended up with, which was $5.50 to $12.50, and we put 5 to 12, and that's more for accounting for negative issues. And if you know on page 1, there's not even barrier-free access to the first floor. So a building like this wouldn't get converted again without barrier-free access. So it is a legal non-conforming use, but it also means that if there's a change in use, that something's going to have to be adapted. Strangely enough, this is not on the heritage conservation list. that does not mean it wouldn't be bound by it. If there came a request to do a change, because of the age of it, it would get automatically referred to Heritage for their review. So that's not escaping the list. It's just not on it right now. And the nature of the conservation list has changed. It's become a review on demand rather than a review by list now. So every property will be looked at. So if a demo request came down or a substantial renovation, it's going to go through and be reviewed. The other issues in the vacancy, these were done, calculated the same way, being a universe of office and then a universe of miscellaneous office from Johnson report. 12.25% was reasonable on this building. It's unusual in itself. And our calculations on the other costs were done. Now, in this case, it's an owner occupied. So because we put a hypothetical net rent, we're also putting an allowance for non-recoverables. In this case, 5%. And just to point out that we do have all the properties today, we provided a table of rates of Collier's managed properties on our last 2 pages of office, retail, and industrial. These are from the statements that we've made. They're non-recoverables, and they range a mean of 9.81% and a median of 7% for every managed property. They go up, they go down. Some years it's 0%, some years 25%. And that's just the nature of real estate when the non-recoverables occur. They tend to show up when we have tenant turnover. So it is an appropriate allowance, and it's one that an owner has to care about. The cap rate is surprisingly low, and when we looked at it, the issues of it were, I think, properly dealt with the application of the rent and the vacancy. It's probably seen as a decent medium-sized or decent small-sized location in the neighborhood, which is advantageous. The only issue to be concerned with is the restrictions placed on it by bylaw for new occupancy, if it changes, or potential for heritage blockage. So we've addressed a lot of that in the year built and quality and condition, design and layout, and building size. It is in the suburbs, so technically, as an office use, this would be required to have a minimum of 6 parking stalls, and I believe there are 2 or 3. So it is below that bylaw. It's legal right now, and it's in a neighborhood where there are a lot of non-conforming parking uses. It just presents an additional obstacle for alternate use. And having said that, we thought that 8.75 was I think it was like a lot of the strength of the location, despite all the other problems. If this were a worse location, we would be looking in the 10s, but there's a bit more motivation in this particular part of the city. Last thing I want to say is that our chairman is correct, as this tends to go to the board an awful lot because, as I keep saying, 1891, just bear that in mind. Over the years, there have been some very not favorable. There have been some very fair decisions. There have been a few we've had to take to municipal board, and in case management, we have worked out the number. And I think that the issues are obvious. It's been assessed on a computerized system incorrectly. It's an anomaly, and our number of 258 is a fair solution. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Kupfer?
Am I correct in stating none of your office rent comparables are residential conversions?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Okay, Lori, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Robert, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
All right, and I have no questions, so let's move on to 280 Stradbrook. Again, let me open the files. Okay, on 280 Stradbrook, you may proceed, Mr. Kupfer.
This is file number 22-906, roll number 1203-1703500. The street address is 280 Stradbrook Avenue. This is another commercial office building. This is 2 stories, constructed in 1987. Total leasable area, 4,124 square feet. I believe that's spread out over the 2 levels, the main level and the second floor. And we have a 2023 modeled assessment of 925,000 that I'll be recommending be maintained today. We have no recent sales to go off of for this property, and it looks like my OFS rent comparables table was not included where it should be on page number 4. But this is an OFS property. No changes or omissions to the comparables. We have the space split out into 2 premise IDs, 2,062 square foot a piece. You can see on my page 5. I wish I had a good answer for you why those 2 rents are different. I think it's just one is the main floor and one is the upper floor. So the upper floor is the 1,411 and the main floor is the 1,597. But your average here would be 62,025 divided by the 4,124. So you're looking at a rate of $15.04 being applied by the model on average between the 2 spaces. Again, I haven't changed anything here. This is all model driven, 6% vacancy, 3% expenses, an $8 shortfall, and in this case, a 5.9% capitalization rate as deriving that value using the income approach of 925,000. I've included the income and expense mailer towards the bottom of the brief. This property is fully owner occupied, so we have no arm's length lease to compare that to. So we are simply turning to our OFS rent comparables table, which I regrettably forgot to include in the submission, but I remind you, shows a weighted average of about $16 with multiple comparables in this area on Donald Street. I believe that this 2023 assessment is a reasonable one, and I'm recommending that it be maintained. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Neufeld?
Just to confirm that you call this an OFS, that is an assessment department terminology, correct?
Yes.
And on the line on page 7, you have 2 classes, suburban A, suburban B, OFS. Which one is this?
I would say this is more towards the suburban B classification.
Suburban B. So your 20th to 80th then ranges from 5.6 to 6.9, and the model is putting this then at 5.9 towards the lower end of the caps then, correct?
Correct.
What's the full range here? Do you have that?
The only capitalization rate information I have is what's on page 7.
How many buildings of this type sold in the 2 years preceding the effective date?
I can't tell you that.
Well, I've earlier introduced evidence that showed that there's only one investment property, and I've heard other assessors agree that there's been a lack of sales. Have you heard that?
No.
Okay. If there were a lack of sales, assuming so, where did the cap rates get developed from then if you don't have sales? Do you know? I mean, I'm asking a hypothetical question, so it's fair. You said you don't know. If you don't know, that's fine too.
To my knowledge, the capitalization rates are derived from sales.
Okay, those are my questions.
Okay, Robert, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Lori, any questions?
No, I have none either, thank you.
Okay, I'm looking at the rent roll on your page 11. It looks like there's one lease. And it's labeled as a net lease for 82.48 per month, which if you take the 4,000 square feet works out to a lease rate of 24.74. Is that correct? Or do you have reason to believe that's not a net lease?
Yes, so on page 9, they checked off the fully owner occupied
Okay.
section, so they're giving conflicting information here between the two. But my understanding is this is an owner occupied space.
Okay, so that could just simply be a book lease then. All right, thank you. I have no more questions then. So you can proceed, Mr. Newfield.
Thank you. The property is owner occupied. Immediately prior to the owner taking possession in 2016, it was leased to a legal firm. So there is an old rent on the books, and I was just reading it. It is slightly higher. It works out to about $13 a foot, and we have 12. And I didn't prepare this. I was just reading that, and so it did have one proven historical rent, and I think that to be fair, our number should be $13 rather than $12. The owner part, again, we're looking at the same rents. We have 470 River, very close by, $12.50 a foot, which is the same vintage as what the last tenant was in at $13 a foot. So there is some good market support for good in terms of two, but two in this region is region of owner occupancy is not bad. And as far as the caps go, again, the rest of it's been calculated the same way. As far as the caps go, the issue with this property is that it still has a very low parking allocation. One of the advantages of being at this corner location, and I drive by this every day, is the potential for a use that's takes advantage of the visibility, but with the low parking, you're stuck with bylaw issues in that the building size as office, an office is 1 stall per 1,000 square feet of gross. So as office, you need 5 stalls, but for retail, it's 1 per 250. So you need 17 stalls. And that's just a limiting factor on its highest and best use, and it keeps the potential users down to being an office style use. And there's a typo here, 2-story house. That doesn't belong in there. House. It says house, but there's no deduction made. So those are typos. They just never made a change to it when I'm reading this. It's a copy of the other one. It is a high traffic region, and it's good for visibility, but this high traffic it's all transient traffic. It's not destination traffic where people are going to this area. Like a destination traffic might be like Regent Avenue where there's a ton of traffic and they're all going to the shopping centers. This part of the city is all transient. People aren't stopping. And if they do, there's a lot of honking going on because it's 2 lanes and it's got to flow. So it's from that perspective, traffic is not an advantage, probably a disadvantage. So I think the 7.5 is reasonable. I don't have a quick calculation in my here, but I'm like I said, I'll just quickly do the number here. I think 13 is fair because that was a rent that it has generated in the past. It's telling me my cloud's not working.
Did you pay your monthly bill?
That could be. That's strange. Yeah, this is very strange. I said 13 and we submitted 12, but my workup was at 12. So we did originally consider 13, and then I guess the person that did it changed it. So the number at $13 a foot is 53,300, which is the income that it generated in till the end of 2016. And the NOI changes to 39,045, and the value is then 520,594, rounded to 521,000. I think that's a bit more reasonable number. Thank you. That's my presentation and change.
Okay, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
Clarifications. You stated there was a $13-ish rent up until 2016, correct?
That's correct.
What page of your brief is that located on?
It wasn't submitted in evidence, it's verbal.
Okay, I have no other questions.
All right, and just on that, I tend to let new evidence be placed in as long as the parties are moving closer together, not further apart. So that's why we'll permit the revision to $13. All right.
And I make a habit of it.
Okay. Questions, Lori?
I have no questions on this. Thank you.
Robert, any questions?
I just have one clarification. With the 13, we've come up with 53,300.
Yes.
And you're using the cap rate of 7.5.
Correct.
And you're coming up with the $39,045.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I just needed to get that. Thank you.
Yep. All
no
right.
more questions.
And I have no questions on this. So thank you for that. We've got 2 more properties and half an hour to do them in. So onwards and upwards. 252 River in the same general area. So on 252 River, Mr. Kupfer.
This is file number 22-1936. Roll number 1203-18388500. Street address is 252 River Avenue. This is a 1-story commercial office building. The leasable area of 5,222 square feet, and originally year built between 1983 and 1987. A model 2023 assessment of $1,407,000 that will be recommending be maintained today. If you scroll to page 2 of my brief, you'll see that we do actually have a recent sale for this property, transacted May 29th, 2019, with both a consideration and sworn value of $1,650,000. And I've included the sales mailer at the end of the brief, so we can touch on that when we get there. This is another suburban office property, so I've included the same OFS comparable chart. No changes or omissions. Like I said, this is all model driven, the 1.407. So again, 6% vacancy, 3% expenses, and in this case, a 5.9% capitalization rate is driving that value, and a modeled rent of $17.96. The building is indicated to us to be fully owner occupied. So again, we don't have a lease to compare that to. So we're going off of the sale price. We're going off of the OFS comparables. If you scroll down to my page 18, you'll see that's where page 18, you'll see that's where the sales questionnaire starts, 18 and 19. They've indicated that yes, the amount shown above is the actual amount paid. Yes, this was an arm's length open market transaction. No, there were not other real estate items included in the sale price. The condition of the building was good. You're welcome to read through the rest of it if you'd like. So in my opinion, our modeled 2023 assessment is supported, and I'm going to recommend that that value be maintained. Thank you.
All right. Questions, Mr. Neufeld?
Yes, what was this building before? It was a law office?
States the vendor was Dinsdale Piranha Group. I would have to look them up to give you more information on them.
No, that they were a law group as well before that. The sale from 2009. Who was the vendor? Who was the previous user? Do you know? Do you know what it was built as? How about that?
The vendor is listed as Dinsdale Piranha Group, like I stated. No, I don't know what it was built as.
Okay. It's listed as wood or steel framed exterior walls. Can you be more specific? Wood or steel?
No, I haven't inspected the property. I can't be more specific.
You had the sales questionnaire, and who was that signed by?
The president, Gordon Howard.
Okay, and the current user. Do you have that information? Who's in there?
Metosis Lemieux Howard Law Corp.
Okay, Howard. Any relation to Gord Howard?
I don't know.
Now, prior to the sale, you had mentioned some company name. You were aware that that was also a law office?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Dinsdale Piranha Group?
Yes.
The vendor on the sales questionnaire?
Yes.
Yes. No, like I said, I would have to look them up to tell you more about them.
And were you aware that both Ms. Matusis and Ms. Lemieux Howard were partners in that firm?
I've already stated no. I can't give you any further information about the vendor.
Okay. Well, I mean, you were talking about the sale and your affirmation that it was a non-arm's length and the rest of this, but so you weren't aware that the purchaser.
No, Mr. Neufeld, the owners, the people who filled out the sales questionnaire, indicated to us that this is an arm's length open market transaction. That's 0.3 on the sales questionnaire.
Okay, Mr. Howard. Now, were you aware that his daughter, Ms. Lemieux Howard, daughter-in-law, and Ms. Matusis were partners both in the previous ownership and now are partners owning the building? So it was an owner-occupant purchase. Were you aware of that?
No.
And were you aware that they purchased the law offices business at the same time as the building?
No.
Well, those are my questions then. Thanks.
Okay, questions, Robert?
No questions, thank you.
Lori, any questions?
I have no questions either.
All right, so your presentation, Mr. Neufeld.
Yes, these questionnaires are rather skimpy. The owner of the building is Gord Howard, and it's his daughter-in-law and her partner bought the building. They were practicing in the former law office, and Gord bought it, and
Sorry, can I just object really quick? What page of your brief is this located on, Mr. Neufeld?
I'm giving verbal. I didn't think you'd be chasing a sale, so I'm responding to it.
Well, Mr. Neufeld, in all fairness, his valuation is coming in significantly below the sale, so
I
he's
find
not
it,
chasing the sale.
well, it's a bit prejudicial to bring the sale forward without knowing the full details, and I just want to eliminate the prejudice. It's not that I I have personally reviewed it, and I know that it was a sale that included concurrently with this a sale of a law office business, and the former partners in the law firm are now own the building. So that's not that. Just I want to set this in perspective in case people like to chase sales. I have researched it. Now the building was originally built as the River Mandarin. The outline of the building was the perimeter on the east, west, and north side was originally screened in patio on and with without basement, and then later was enclosed. It's wood frame construction. I knew the owner quite well and his wife, and been in the building many times. It is fairly poor construction, being wood frame. The condition is low. It was built from reclaimed wood and not done by a professional construction company, but it is on Stradbrook, and that's the advantage for it. So there were some expenses in the first renovation when the law office took it over to change it from a restaurant usage to an office use. Abundant parking, and that's the positive side of it. As far as the rent goes, we are dealing with a very substandard building, and quality would be miscellaneous or less, not premium. And again, firsthand experience, been all through the building while at different stages of its life. Leaning on the rents I just mentioned earlier, for example, 470 River at $12.50 a foot is better than this. We put $12, not influenced at all by the sale price because we knew that it had nothing to do with the real estate. It had all to do with other factors. And the same calculation in terms of vacancy and recoverable, non-recoverable costs and shortfall. And I think that the cap is a bit lower than it would infer, mostly because I think, the concept of valuation isn't to cherry pick and I say I want the lowest rent and the highest cap. It's a balancing act. And we did opt for a lower rent based on quality. And as a result, that I think the cap can be a bit higher as well, because, you're not out to double dip a problem. It was addressed in the rent. And I've already spoken to you about the issues. The quality is poor, and the location is good, and the parking is good. And we have an asset that's going to have a very low remaining economic life due to condition issues, and it's a future teardown project and a redevelopment for a Stradbrook multifamily, quite frankly. And one should probably be looking at this property on a land value basis rather than an improvement value basis. That's my presentation.
Okay, questions, Mr. Kupfer?
What is your value on a land basis?
I haven't done an estimate of land value. I mean, 18,000 feet at, would end up being, $35 a foot. So 1.5 million an acre. That's a pretty fair rate for the area. Demolition costs will be low because it's wood frame. So I think on a land basis, 1.5 million is pretty reasonable.
I have no questions for the agent. Thank you.
Acre, sorry, clarifying per acre.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
Okay, Lori, any questions?
I have none either, thank you.
Robert, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, so let's move on then to our last property down the street or up the street, whichever way you want to consider it. 385 River. And let me open the files. Okay, do we have? All right. So you can proceed, Mr. Kupfer.
I think the applicants checked off class and liability on this one.
Okay, yeah, all right, let me just look. Okay, yes, on classification liability then, Mr. Neufeld.
The property is a family services building, and I think that Mr. Mercury, who's not here, was looking at this to give us a legal, and we haven't got around to it. I think that there's a request into the city to review the classification, and we're going to go through that system on that as for today. Of course, we can just confirm the class now and then look at the outcome of where we're at to do that. We're just not up to speed on this yet. You'll note that it's a registered charity. That's on page 6, and the services provided are listed on page 5. We're just determining the section of the act if this is relief to the indigent. Mr. Mercury was looking after this, so I'm just going to ask to confirm it, the class and liability right now.
All right.
Class, we have a further appeal in municipal board, and so probably that's what we're going to be looking at.
All right. Okay, so then quantum, which first of all, Mr. Kupfer, any questions on class and liability?
No questions.
Okay, any questions from the panel on class and liability?
No questions.
No questions.
All right, then on quantum, Mr. Kupfer.
File number 22-3099. This is roll number 12032452000. Street address is 385 River Avenue. This is a one-story commercial office building constructed in 1954. The leasable area on file of 8,496 square feet, and a 2023 modeled assessment of $1,759,000 that I'll be recommending today. Page 3 of the brief shows no recent sales for the property. This is, again, a suburban office property, so I've included the same OFS comparable table that I've shown numerous times today. The space is demised between the main floor and the basement area, as you'll see on my page 7, and we have 2 different rates being applied. Again, I haven't touched any of this. This is all coming out of the model. It's producing that income value of $1,759,000. The space is fully owner occupied, or it's being presented as fully owner occupied. So we have, again, no lease information to compare that model to. Instead, we're reliant on our OFS comparables table. So that's all the information I have on this property. I'm going to recommend that model value be maintained. Thank you.
All right, questions, Mr. Newfield?
Page 1, actual year 1954, effective year 1976. Do you know how that came about?
No, I don't.
You haven't been in the building, as you said, right? What was its former use? Do you know?
Prior to the Winnipeg Children's Access Agency, I don't know.
And just out of curiosity, which of these rents are more comparable than in the 3 pages you've provided?
I haven't identified any one or two comparable here for the subject. I'm just presenting the total range.
Well, would you not agree that these are all superior to the subject?
No, I would not agree that these are all superior to the subject.
Okay, then if you don't agree, which ones aren't?
I have not prepared a list of which are inferior and which are superior to the subject.
Well, I mean, you can't have it both ways. Either they're comparables or they're not. You're saying it's a big list, but you haven't worked it out, right?
I'm saying it's a big list that includes higher end, lower end, and mostly everything in between of OFS properties.
Well, what's at the lower end?
The lower end here, well, 844 McLeod Avenue would be at the lower end. It's at $11 a foot. 1313 Border would be at the lower end. That's at $10.50 a foot. 1765 Sargent would be at the lower end. That's at $11 a foot, and so on.
So you're picking rents that are lower rent end. I meant quality end. Have you been in any buildings? Any of these the 3 you just quoted? Have you been in any of them?
No, I'm not prepared to speak on the quality or condition of the 89 comparables that have been submitted.
Those are my questions.
Okay, questions, Lori?
No, thank you.
Robert, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, I've got one on your rental rate. On the upper floor, 1662, which is above both your weighted average and median, which would say this is an above average property in terms of rent. Why would that be?
Well, that's a fair question. Other than the location of the space, the fact that it's all on one story, all on one floor, I don't really have a better answer for you than that as to why it was modeled that way. It is slightly higher than our weighted average. That's about all the information I have about it, as it's owner occupied.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Newfield, you can begin then.
The subject property was built in the 50s as a doctor's office. So inside it is, and it's masonry, all masonry wall construction, and the walls are all supporting walls. So it's one of those old style little doctor's office buildings. Every little cubicle is a doctor's examining room or waiting room. Each little room is about 100 to 125 square feet. Now, the advantage is that they all have sinks in them. uh, left over from the doctor's days. But it's just an old obsolete building. The current user is a very interesting agency. This is where custody family situations have visitation right happening. So there's two entrances, one from the street side on the east, and well, I shouldn't say where they are. There are two separate entrances where each of the two former family unit members will come in, one with the children and one with not. And then the children are handed over to a supervisor, and then it's supervised children's visitation building. It's a very civilized way to dealing with a very horrible situation. They've made use of the building with the way it's set up because that's all the budget they had for it. And it's certainly not a good building. They are looking for a better site, and they are attempting to market the site, and there's been no interest. And probably the only interest they're going to get is someone who's going to develop a multifamily on top of it. Demolition costs in this case will be quite large because it is all reinforced concrete framing and foundation with the block on top. So it's an obsolete old space. The issue again, you can see why we don't know where this fits in the class, and because this isn't really may or may not be covered by the act, so it's questionable. Now the basement has been finished in the same clinic space, but it is below grade. There is actually a little elevator that goes between the floors, and that was installed years ago. Sometimes it works. Everything is just old, and their HVAC units need replacement because they're old. It's essentially the improvement is obsolete, and we're just looking at a base rent again, and we looked again at the $12 range. This is something we discussed earlier. I mentioned 470 River, and just so you know what building I'm talking about, this is the building that looks like a house across the street from Safeway on Osborne, so it's a better location. And it wasn't really designed as a house. It was designed as a retail operation that looked like a house. There's two of these buildings side by side, 470, and I forget the address on the other one. That's about the only that's one of the better comps in the neighborhood. I mentioned that 280 Stradbrook had an old rent, testified earlier at $13, and that's a much superior building. So we put 12, and in the basement we put 5. We do have some basement rents, as I mentioned earlier. They're on our 4th page. The top 2 are legal uses. I think that the subject's basement would be a legal use because it can be separately demised because of the way it was built, but it is still a below grade floor, and a $5 rate would be reasonable for that. Been through this extensively, trying to help them with their issues, and as I said, they're hoping to find a better site, funding permitted, but unfortunately they're saddled with this very obsolete building where that we've attempted to look at finding a tenant for it, finding a purchaser for it. It's probably in the long run going to attract somebody who wants the land and has a plan on 13,000 feet to put a medium-rise building, a multifamily building, and it would be a land value issue. And again, like the highest and best use on this property is definitely the land. So it's about 0.3 of an acre. And again, looking at about 1.5 million an acre, that puts the land value at about 455,000. So our number on the rental value is a touch on the high side. I didn't do this workup, and the person who did this was never in the building. I agree with the rents. I totally disagree with the cap rate. I would be putting this much higher just because it's completely lacking highest and best use in its current configuration. But I'm not, as the chairman said, you can only make changes if you want to move closer. So I won't make a change. That's my presentation.
All right, the questions, Mr. Kupfer?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Lori?
I have no questions, thank you.
Robert, questions?
No questions, thank you.
All right, so we have heard all the items on today's agenda, and this hearing is now concluded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.